Good evening, everybody. Joe from NDB Aviation. It's been a while, but tonight I want to have a discussion with you all about military add-ons for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, and also kind of include X-Plane 11, Prepare 3D, and any other sims out there that deal with add-ons for a simulator that's made for overall VFR, IFR, or flight training purposes, or just for joy, versus an actual combat simulator, because the two are very different. So in tonight's video, we're going to talk about, I'm sorry, my iPad's down here that I'm reading off of. We're going to have a discussion about, what is an add-on versus an actual combat simulator when it comes to military add-ons and military aircraft. We're going to talk about the history of where these have come from, how they've evolved over the years, and how they've gotten better, and how we have some really amazing combat simulators today that you all can really enjoy. DCS is one of them. And then how that history changes and how these products evolve, and then also how some of them will actually grow with the program. As we've seen already with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, there are a lot of products that have started off very simple, very basic, with maybe what looks good on the exterior and overall cockpit looks okay, but now they've actually grown into a full-fledged add-on that might be worth the initial asking price, which is something we're going to talk about as well. Then we're going to get into realism versus arcade style of add-ons or combat simulators. Then suggested combat sims, that will also go into arcade versus realistic. And then finally, how to vet a good add-on or even a good simulator. Talk about a few things that I utilize whenever I look at something that I want to spend my money on and then use for my joy of flight simming or combat simming. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and let's talk about add-ons versus combat simulators. Now, primarily, we have seen some good add-ons for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, X-Plane 11, Prepare 3D, and a lot of these pair up with the whole architecture that they're going for, but usually a combat add-on doesn't work out in these flight simulators because you're adding more code, you're adding certain things in, like missiles, guns, explosions, all kinds of different things that are not meant to be in the flight simulator, and that adds in a lot of work. That adds in a lot of glitches, a lot of other problems. So an add-on is a completely standalone product that goes on top of another software. So if you're in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, you've looked through the store already, you see the Corsair, you see the F-14, the F-15. These are combat aircraft versus the combat trainers. There's also Spitfire, and now we have the Reno add-on pack, which adds on aircraft that are now racers, but not exactly combat add-ons. So we have these different things that are just overlying software that goes within an architecture or a program and has to play nice within it. Then you have combat simulators, so not just a flight simulator, but a combat simulator, which is made specifically for maybe a basic theater, an overall arching theme of warfare within a certain area, a suggested map area that then is defined. You have limits. You can't fly all around the world in usual combat simulators, and you have specific missions. In the combat simulators, you also have things that are designed to be like combat. You have explosions, you have missiles, you have weapon systems, you have all kinds of things that you have to learn to actually get the most out of it. And there are some really great ones out there. In the past, the one I grew up, the first one I really had was F-117 Nighthawk. There were two different versions of that, and the only one I could find any imagery for was version DOS number 2. That one was a lot of fun, but it treated like the F-117 like it was a fighter jet, not a actual bomber. So we've seen some things evolve over time, and that comes down to expectations of a combat simulator. In the past, combat sims were basically just another flight simulator with some basic combat built in. As time has gone on, though, we've been able to take a lot of the defense world's overall simulators, add-ons, and technologies and merge that into the consumer side, especially as microprocessors have gotten better, RAM has gotten faster, graphics processing cards have grown in size and capabilities. And we have what we have today. We have DCS, we have Ace Combat, what was it, World of War, or not Warcraft, but War Thunder with the aviation add-ons to it. We have all these different things that look visually stunning and beautiful, but you go back to the F-117 days, where you had add-ons like that, and then we had F-16, we had Falcon 4.0, we had Jane's Fighter Anthology, we had the Jane's add-ons, we had the Microsoft Combat Simulator. We had all these things that each time it was a step up. It was slightly better than the last. And then we finally get to today's world where things are a lot better in essence of just overall look, fit, and finish. And we actually have actual systems in there that are declassified in nature, but you can learn how to use a radar. You can learn how to use all of the early warning systems. You can use how to properly use chaff, flare, all those other things. And this evolution has grown really well. And then some products also grow within their architecture. This is something that comes down to things like DCS, where they have add-ons that may not be directly involved with the actual developer. Maybe an outside third-party developer made something, and it has to merge into the DCS world. But this is really specific for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, X-Plane 11 and soon to be 12, and Prepare 3D. A lot of add-ons are designed to fit in. And the problem with that is what we've seen with the F-15 in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice add-on. I've had fun with it, I fly it a lot, and it's been a lot of fun with some quirks where I wish I had things I could do, like setting bingo fuel, setting other things within the actual aircraft that are useful for doing some fun stuff. For the most part though, the F-15, the F-14, all these fighter jets that have been added in, even the PAC-50 or the Sukhoi 57 Felon, they are there for fun. They are not there for combat. And so you see them evolve, they grow in time. And the F-15 is one that I like to focus in on because it's a good add-on overall. It may not be worth the cost, but Just Flight's F-15 has grown with every iteration of Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Because when you first bought it, or when I first bought it, there were a lot of issues with the overall flight model, the overall aerodynamics, and how the flight dynamics in the simulator themselves didn't really jive well or didn't work well with the F-15 and a lot of other aircraft. And this wasn't exactly the fault of Just Flight. This was something with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 that's gotten better over time. And this is how a product grows with the architecture it's within. And this is kind of funny. I'm sorry, my light's right in front of me, so there's shadow all over my face on that. But bear with me. If you have a brand new flight simulator that you're working with and you're making things to go into it, and they are merging from other developers, there are always going to be some growing pains. And you're going to see this if you're a flight simulator that's now addicted to flight simulation, you want to keep growing with it. When X-Plane 12 comes out, you're going to see the same thing happen there. X-Plane has always had growing pains when it goes from 9, 10, 11, now 12's coming. You're going to see the different things that are going to be tie-in problems. So certain aircraft that work perfectly in X-Plane 11 will not work perfectly in X-Plane 12, and so on and so forth. The same thing goes with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Stay with me on this. The F-15, when it first came into Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, was basically just a shell of what it is. And it still kind of is, with some promises of future updates to give better functionality, better usability, and make it more like the real aircraft. But this is why I want to have this discussion tonight. The whole point of this video is to really set a bar and at least set expectations for all these add-ons. They are just that. It is an add-on to a flight simulator, not a combat simulator. That's the big difference. Don't expect all the things you would see in DCS to be seen in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 isn't there yet. It doesn't have all the functionality built in for all that coding. I'm sure it's coming, and at some point it can actually handle all those things. But right now, you need to go to DCS if you want a true F-15 or a true F-14 Tomcat, or some Sukhoi like the Su-37, the Su-35, the Su-27 Flanker. Just going back, like if you want actual fighter aircraft that work the way they're supposed to, you need a combat simulator. And that is where I'm going to kind of cut off this history to understand where we are and where we're going. And I want to talk about now realism and arcade. Realism is exactly how it sounds. You are flying an aircraft, it acts the way it should, or at least as close as you can possibly replicate it in the confines of the simulator you're using. Given VR has made this a little bit better because there's now more of a sense of being immersed into the aircraft versus just looking at a screen. Looking at a screen has a lot of caveats, flaws. You have a limited field of view. Therefore, the sensation of movement, the sensation of time, space, everything around you is very limited. causing a overall sense of realism to sometimes be lacking. Tracker IR was something that helped to actually remedy this years ago and make things a little bit more realistic. But in the confines of this video and discussion, realism will just be a add-on or combat simulator that acts the way it should. It replicates the systems, the flight dynamics, and everything else in that world the way it would in real life, or as close as you can potentially get to it. Arcade, think of Ace Combat, think of War Thunder. These are not true flight simulators. They are not true combat simulators. They are there for the joy of having fun and flying fighter aircraft. That is it. They are not meant to have the exact flight dynamics, and usually all they are is one flight model tweaked for every different aircraft. That is about it. That's how Jane's Fighter Anthology worked, and a lot of other aircraft sims worked, or combat simulators worked in the past, was they had one basic flight model, and then they tweaked it for each different aircraft and just changed the exterior model. That's really about it, unfortunately. And that's where arcade flight simulators basically are, and arcade combat simulators. So, suggested combat sims. This one in the past, I feel like we had a lot more options that were growing and getting better. Lock-On, Falcon 4.0. Now I feel like we really just have DCS. DCS is still pretty strong, and there are some other ones out there and other growing ones, and there are a couple stalled projects that were looking very promising that, unfortunately, like everything else, never came to fruition. DCS is probably your best realistic flight simulator, or combat simulator, I should truly say. DCS is a straight up realistic combat simulator, as close as you can get for the price point of it. Prepare 3D had some combat stuff built into it, but it is not something that most people have access to due to the DoD restrictions and overall military restrictions of the coding that is tied in with Lockheed Martin Prepare 3D for that version of it. So DCS is going to be your go-to combat simulator for realism. Now, if you want something that's arcade style, Ace Combat's great. It's fun. It has a fun storyline usually. I don't think I've played the last 3 versions of Ace Combat. I think last ones I do were like 3, 4, and I don't know if they made a 5, but I played several of the different generations going up. And then once I hit about college, I got out of it. So yeah, I played it for quite a while, but War Thunder and Ace Combat are going to be your basic arcade go-tos. Now, with all that said, I do want to talk about what do I do when I want to find a add-on or combat simulator that I'm going to actually put my money down on. So I've bought a couple of combat simulators, or not combat sim, well, I got into DCS for a short while about a year ago for the fun of it, just to see what it was like. And I found that 1, I did not have the time to get into it. 2, it was what I wanted. But again, I didn't have the time to invest to properly learn each aircraft's radar systems, weapon systems, and everything else to the level that I wanted to. So it was kind of over my head for the time I was able to dedicate to it. But when you're going out there and you're looking for a combat simulator or add-ons for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, do take in time to look at the reviews. I know I don't have too many reviews up right now. I'm trying to catch up on all the videos I've been trying to make. But look at the YouTube reviews, online reviews of people's websites that are trusted, and see what they're saying. The next thing to do, look at the forums. People speak usually pretty freely on forums. However, I do feel like most of the time forums are rolled with trolls, and it's sad to see sometimes when a developer trolls the trolls on their forums. I think that's a very negative thing. It's very unprofessional as well, but it does happen. It's an unfortunate thing, but there are some good information, good places out there, good forums out there to find some good information. Xplane.org has a lot of good stuff for anything that's Xplane related. Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 has its own forums. Prepare 3D has their own forums, and there are many third-party places as well to go and find information about add-ons. But again, remember, usually people complain more than they give praise on forums. Next up, look at the track record and what kind of stable of aircraft these developers have made. There are a lot of developers out there that make worn and done, and then they never support their product after that. There were a lot that did that for Xplane. There were several that did that for Lockheed Martin, and there were a lot that did that for Microsoft Flight Sim X. They made worn overall aircraft that looked pretty cool, and people were really excited about it. Then it got released, and it was a complete flop, and then the people never supported it after that. It happens. One of the best add-ons that I enjoyed with Xplane was back with Xplane 9. And this developer is still around, but they don't have the time to keep up this worn aircraft. I don't fault them for that. I just wish they did. and it was a F-104 Starfighter for X-Plane 9. I enjoyed that. I had a great time flying it. It was a really well done overall add-on, and I miss it. I wish they could bring it back for X-Plane 12 because the F-104 is one of my favorite aircraft just for its overall difficulty to fly, all the different other issues that happens with it, and it's still a very simple aircraft. So it offered a lot and it was a good time. So look at their track record, look at what they're making, and if they're offering updates. There are a lot of people that make very minute updates, and usually that update is only to keep the add-on working with the flight simulator. They're not improving the exterior model. They're not improving the interior cockpit. They're not improving or refining the engine. They're not improving or refining any of the other stuff that they could potentially implement in that flight simulator. They're just kind of giving up on it and just making sure, yeah, it checks a box for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 or X-Plane 11 or 12, and they can keep selling it. That's it. So be very careful about what you buy and how much money you put down, because some of these developers are not going to be there to give you the support you want moving forward. So that pretty much wraps up the suggested ways I look at and I vet certain products that are add-ons or combat simulators. And that wraps up this discussion. If you guys have certain questions or comments about this video, put them in the comment section below. If there's certain add-ons or certain combat simulators you want to know more about, feel free to ask. Maybe I'll get time, hopefully soon, to make a video about some of these other things. I have a couple add-ons I'm making videos about and a new state of flight simulation coming up real soon. I was just trying to get a little bit more information from a couple of key people that I know behind the scenes to maybe share with you guys, or at least be able to share. So thank you all very much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy out there. See you again real soon. Bye-bye.